Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming for this conference. The title is Formats Dominate the World. And for this to be true, there should be a good reason. And this is why we have a panel of top professional people today. And they're going to share their experiences and ideas with us. I'd like to start by welcoming the managing partner of Motion Films Turkey, a company that has produced many international formats inside Turkey, Mrs. Tuba Guvelioglu. From Echo Rights as managing director, Mr. Frederick Malmborg. The founder of Format Biz, Mrs. Chiara Duranti. And, well, he's not only known by throwing the greatest parties in DISCOP, he's also known by the big scope of success in the business, the founder of global agency, Mr. Izzet Pinto, and the CEO and founder of Armoza Formats, it's Mr. Avi Armoza. So we're going to start by asking our Carlotta, oh, sorry. Yeah, I guess. Well, there's a reason for this. Okay, I need to also present Mrs. Carlotta Rossi. She's coming from Scomunica, and she's going to explain to us the name of her company. Yes. So I'm going to start by Mrs. Chiara. Today we're gonna ask the panel questions, and every now and then we have the chance for you to ask your questions. At the end of the session we'll have 10 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes where you get to ask whatever you want. Why do you think the formats dominate the world in general?
Okay. Let me first introduce Format Biz. Format Biz is like a kind of agency that we start in Italy about the monitoring of formats in terms of scripted and unscripted formats. And we first thought that the main issue was to see what's going on in the other international market. Why? Because our broadcaster, our main partner, wouldn't like to take any risk in the Italian market. So they would rather prefer to buy something that is already proven, that already have an history. So it's, especially now that there is a turnover, there is a global crisis, an international crisis, and in Italy now the situation is really bad, especially with the main broadcaster, because Mediaset is not doing very well, and Rai Uno as well. So it's a very tough moment. It's a very tough moment at the moment in Italy right now. So it's better to have something that is already a proven success abroad. So you don't want to risk, you don't want to produce a pilot, you don't want to produce anything new, and you prefer to do something that is already a success somewhere else. Because we think that the globalization is very important also in Italy. So it's important to have a format that maybe has a big success in Israel, in Turkey. And so especially now we are looking for some specific territory. And right now the trend is Israel again and Turkey again. So, and our main focus is let's see what's going on all over the world. Let's see what is the best title. Let's see what is the best brand, and just we buy it, we take an option, and we produce it. So
go the safe way, basically.
It's safe. It's safely for broadcaster, for producer. There are some exceptions. And the only exception is Ballandi Entertainment, the guy that was supposed to be here tonight, and he couldn't make it. Why Ballandi? Because Ballandi is mainly a big producer for Rai Uno. Rai Uno in prime time produce a long prime time show, now from 9 o'clock to 11:30. So we need a show that lasts forever. So with the classical variety show, with a one-man show, with a dancer, with singing, with a big guest. So this is the only case that really works a lot in Italy. So it's not really a format because it's a one-man show with a big talent, with a big actor, a big famous Italian host. But that's just a key history, that's a case, the only case that we have in Italy. For the other channel, we prefer to have a proven format, something that is already a success somewhere else.
Thank you. I would like to ask this question again to Frederick. Why do you think the formats now are a big hit? We will get back to something else as well, with the difference between the scripted and the non-scripted later on. But this question also, it's important to see how everybody feels about formats, because it's a fact now. Formats, whether scripted or non-scripted, they are in the main TV stations and they sell the most, and they're very successful. So what do you think about that?
No, I think because the viewers are getting more and more global and they're having more and more the same taste. And then to attract them, a brand is very important. So that's, that it's something that people recognize online everywhere. And then, of course, the format itself, that it collects the knowledge. It may look simple to do a hit TV show, but it's actually lots of work and money investment behind it, and of course sharing that between different countries makes 100% sense. So I think what we've seen the last years is, however, that I think the format business somehow has been struggling a bit the last years on the non-scripted formats because of what has been so popular in the US and in the UK especially and in the West is the character-driven shows that is not format basically. Okay. So to some extent, I think we've been struggling the last years, but perhaps the last year I think we're seeing more formats again after 5 years of almost only character-driven docu-soaps almost.
Thank you. I have another question. Do you think that a specific format works best in one region than the other, and why do you think this happens?
I think it's the most classic comment in any country where you pitch a format that, oh, my country is so different. And yes, we need to adapt this a lot. And personally, I may be wrong, but I think there is more formats ruined than improved by local adaptation, because I think we're tending to exaggerate that each country is different. I think a viewer is a viewer, and especially if you take under the age of 30, they are very similar, much more similar than I think we realize today, because they have access to the same popular media. So I don't think they are different there. Well, however, the tradition among broadcasters is different, because many countries would never dare to take a risk unless they really have to. And there are risk-taker countries like UK has always been very risk-taking, and Holland and US, they like to try good ideas, and you don't get fired as a broadcaster executive if you take a risk that fails. But then many other countries are totally risk-averse, and But I think it's also a matter of maturity. Like Ukraine, I think, was the country who was buying the most formats last year. It was an incredible amount of 80 formats adapted or something. And I think that's something that you do in the beginning, but then you start to understand that, actually get confidence that you can develop your own ideas. And then the country starts to become an exporter of formats. But I think Turkey is a good example. Nobody would buy a Turkish drama, Turkish format 5 years ago, but now it's becoming quite powerful. So I think it's a matter of maturity in the market.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mrs. Carlotta as well about the formats. Why, from your point of view, what sorts of formats you think they could touch us most?
Well, you were talking about globalization and the fact that formats are dominating the world. I think the fact is that certain formats are dominating the world. There's a lot out there, we all know. There's a lot of different kinds of formats, and based, as Frederick was saying, on people or coaching or teaching things. But the ones that work the best and actually do and are actually becoming the ones that are selling the most, and we have a couple of people on this panel who are, have found the right chemistry for the formats, are the ones that touch upon certain basic elements that are common, across cultures and across people, which are basically not as a genre, but as something that you look up to. One is talent, and that is basic. And with talent goes competition. And along with these two is emotion. So when you touch on these things, which is partly psychological, partly social, it kind of goes through, different cultures and different people all around the world. these formats are the strongest, just because they touch on everything that we can understand. And so in some countries, smaller formats that don't touch on these things probably won't sell as much as in other countries. But if you see, you all know about X Factor, The Voice, The Taste. You know about all these big formats that are actually working on the same exact elements. And it's a study, it's a formula. And it always works when the formula is just right, when you have the right dimension, when you have the right weights of all these three elements. And then with all these three elements come other things that, of course, get along with it. Emotion means family, emotion means love, emotion means dating. So when dating becomes competition, then you have the format. When talent becomes competition, then you have the format. So key elements that
Very interesting.
Yes.
So we have an element of drama in the formats.
Yeah.
So we need drama somehow. And we also have the scripted formats. So I have my question to Mr. Izzat. The non-scripted formats, they have interaction with the viewers. It's a competition, like Carlotta said. What do you think about the scripted ones? Are they as popular, as big? And what is your experience about the scripted formats?
I believe that in terms of formats, usually non-scripted works better because, for example, even in the market, like 90% of the formats sold worldwide are non-scripted. Because selling scripted rights are very difficult, and besides local drama series, people need entertaining formats. And when we look at entertainment formats, we have such great genres like from reality, dating, game show, talent. So I believe that in format business, a non-scripted site is working better for all the distributors, I would believe.
Thank you. Mr. Avi, I would like to know what you think in general about what we talked about so far. The scripted, the non-scripted, the markets, the territory, what makes it good?
I think, we are witnessing growth both in scripted and non-scripted. And the fact now that, for our point of view, for example, when we were selling shows for remake, mainly for the US scripted show, like we know, like Hostages that was sold to CBS. But because of the success of the format, we also finding a new market that currently we are able to sell, the original show from Israel in Hebrew language. And for the first time, we were able to sell it both to BBC and to Canal Plus. So I think the success of the format generating another line of business of selling a ready-made show. And people around the world are willing now to see if something is a success, so we would like to see the original. Why should we see the adaptation if we are able to see the original? And usually the original, most of the time, is better. So, but those are, as Izet said, those are two different markets, the scripted one and the entertainment. The entertainment is more you're selling a formula, and in scripted you're selling, the script for remake. And it's require much more adaptation in terms of the script writing and adaptation for the local market. With the formula, you can play much more, which you cannot play with the scripted. But the advantage of when you buy a scripted show is a format that you save a lot of time. You have something to be based on, and
especially if you have more all your elements. Yeah. Excellent, thank you. I have another question for you as well. Who's responsible for the success of the format? Do you think it's the network, the creator, the territory? Because it needs all of those elements to have a successful format, apart from the format that is touching us and the drama in it, or the scripted or non-scripted. Sometimes we don't know the real reason why an excellent format didn't really work. Where do you think the problem is? Where is the responsibility? Who has the highest shares in making the format successful? Whether it's the network, the creator, the viewers, the viewership. What do you think about that?
We are in a very risky business, and it's risky because many elements of the business we cannot control. We can be very successful in thinking of a good idea and then producing a very good pilot, and then even maybe producing a successful season. And then when you send it out to the world, there's many elements that are not in your control as much as you would like to. You cannot control, for example, the host, who will pick the host. You cannot control the level of production. You cannot control what the competition will do against, when they place your show, what the competition will put against it. So it's a combination of, professionalism and a lot of luck.
Excellent.
If I can add something,
yes, of
I
course.
have a perfect example. Before I found Format Bs, I was working for Mediaset, and in 2001, we bought Survivor, but the original format, Expedition Robinson. We bought the format because I thought that it was a great format. This was before Survivor, Mark Burnett, and blah, blah, blah. We bought the format. We adapted the format for Italia Uno in prime time. It was a disaster. It was totally a failure. I was shocked because I believed strongly in that format. I thought that was a fantastic format. It was impossible that was not working in Italy, no? So I started to make research and find out why the format didn't work. It was not the format, because the format was a good format. So I believe that if you have a good format and you are not able to adapt the format locally, there is something wrong in your company. You didn't make the right decision. Yes. You didn't produce it well. And in fact, Mediaset, I was in Mediaset, we produced the format in the worst way. So it was really, really, really bad. In fact,
it wasn't that bad.
I have been in Mediaset for 15 years, so I know the company, and I know the company very well. After some years, Magnolia, when Magnolia started the company in Italy, they bought again the format, and they built a new format that was the Survivor with the VIP people. It was a success. So, returning to the beginning, when you have a big format, a good format, if you don't produce the format in the right way and it's fair, it means that you did something wrong. Punto. Full stop. It's a formula. It's a formula.
Excellent.
It's like a Wheel of Fortune. No? The host was a fantastic host. Then he died. And so what? You just redo the format, you just redo the show with another host, because if you have a good format, the format has to work. No way. There is something wrong if you don't... Paul Gilbert, Vice President CBS, he always say, if a good format, and you believe in a good format, is not working in a territory, this does not mean that the format is a bad format. So you have to try and maybe sell it somewhere else and prove that this was a good format. So I strongly believe in formats, scripted and unscripted. If something is wrong, it means that someone has made a mistake.
So do you think it's the territory, it's the people? For example, you were talking about your experience.
Yeah.
If we think about it, maybe it's, well, I'm just thinking, and you correct me if I'm wrong, maybe it's the viewership, it's the trend. They're not trained to watch such a thing at this time. Do you think this might apply, or doesn't have any logic?
If you are a good producer, you know exactly what the public, what the viewers want. Because if you are a good producer, you know the target group, no? You know exactly the time slot, you know everything. You have to make research about everything before you put your show on air. So if you make something wrong, it means and the show is not working, it means that you are responsible. Because if you have a good format and you are not producing the good format like Survivor, it means that you made something wrong. There is no way. In fact, Survivor is a good example. Survivor is a great format. So it's impossible that it's not working.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'd like to hear Frederick and Carlotta had something about what Chiara was saying. So I was looking at you and you were like, yeah. I was like,
no, but I think the execution is, of course, crucial. And sometimes you tend to focus too much on the idea itself.
Yes.
A crap idea can be a success with a good execution, because if you bring certain elements that works in that market in. But then, I mean, to comment to your question, or can then any format be a success if you execute it well? Maybe.
No, not any. I'm not saying any. I'm just talking about the good one. There are good format and bad format. So we are not now we are not talking about the definition of format because we are not at the university. I'm not teaching at the university. So that is another point. We are talking about good format. When you go to the market, there are good format, very good format, and there are very, very bad format. That's it. So
we believe you. Thank you.
So, and when you see a good format, of course, everybody goes and try to buy it. And then you see so and so forth. So
yeah,
that's the main point.
But sometimes the person gets lucky, and sometimes the format would really be great. Carlotta, you had something to say?
I wanted to say about a good format, which is the perfect example for like our territory is MasterChef, because we are used to seeing like ladies sitting around and just cooking, like on Rai Uno, you know, they just sit there and they cook. So MasterChef is completely something new. And what happened in Italy, which is exactly what they had to do, is that they kept the format as it is. So they kept the format as it is in every country. It's a 50-minute format. They air it back to back because we have a prime time that is longer. But the episodes are exactly like they are in the rest of the territories. What happens in the format and the formula is exactly the same. Nobody has worked on it to change it. So this has to do with what Chiara is saying, and also Frederick before, just because if you have what it takes to have people watch it, and you do it right, it's just going to happen. I mean, that's what we did in Italy, and we were used to something completely different.
Thank you.
Because you have to respect the format.
Exactly.
I mean, if you buy a format, you have to do it like it is. If you change the format, it means that you change the mechanism, you change the formula.
So we follow the Bible
then
of the format.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then you make it wrong. There are two main differences. One is local adaptation. And one thing is when you change the format, the formula. That's the main point. And the Italians are so stupid that they don't understand. You don't have to change a good format. You have to localize the format, but not change the format. If you have a good formula, just follow the formula. Great. Why the British come to Italy and they are so upset with us? The BBC, especially the BBC, are like, oh my gosh. Because they are like, oh, here are the Italians with creativity and fantasy.
No, but it's not that bad, okay?
It is.
It's really not that bad.
Mrs. Chiara, thank you very much for your interaction. Frederick spoke about execution also is important. The execution through the production company and through the producers basically, and through the consultancy of the show and all that. I'm going to talk to Mrs. Tuba here. They have motion films. They represent a different side of the formats, which is part of the execution. They have worked with international formats. I'd like Tuba here to explain to me what they did in Turkey and what was the addition they brought to the formats when they come and shoot in Turkey. And I think this also applies when a format is international. And we need to know more details about this, please.
Well, as motion films, we execute the format, and we have been doing this for quite some time. We've done shows like The Bachelorette, Amazing Race. We've done a show called The Challenge, which is a US show, which is sort of like the spin-off of Survivor and Big Brother. They've combined it together. And it's really great to work on formats, and for us it's been great because we sort of get to input creatively as well, sort of bringing the Turkish element into the whole, you know, the races, putting the Turkish elements into the races, or the dates of Bachelorette, for example. And they're very different, of course, because in the execution you have a huge problem, which is the budget. And we have seen where in formats, for example, we've done Amazing Race Australia and Amazing Race US, and they were completely different because the budget of one was about half the size of the US one, and we had to really limit the resources and limit everything. And then I think that, for example, the US Amazing Race got better ratings because they put a lot of effort into it, and there was more sort of, you know, art department, and there was more extras, or, you know, just a little bit more budget into it. And then the one in Australia was a little bit more minimal. So this, I think, makes a huge difference. In our part, this is where, you know, we get sort of the end of the whole spectrum, where it's kind of like, well, is it as creative as it could be, or is it not as, because of the budget restrictions?
All right, excellent, thank you. Before we move on to Mr. Izzat again with his case study, I'd like to see if anybody has any questions to ask. Questions? No? Yes?
Actually, I was very curious about the elements which made...
Could you hold on a second? They're bringing you a mic. Which is not working, the mic. Okay, fine, sorry.
The difficulties, you said that in the first version we made mistakes. And what kind of mistakes did you observe later, retrospectively, looking at your first adaptation of Survivor?
The mistakes were made by Mediaset because we didn't follow exactly the mechanism of the format, no? We just improvised, we just changed things. We didn't follow the Bible exactly how it was. We also introduced new elements. That was the studio-based show. And you know that in the first show, it was Expedition Robinson, actually. It was not Survivor, because at that stage, Survivor didn't exist. And there was Expedition Robinson. And as you know, in Italy, there is always a studio, a talk show, because we like to talk forever. And so that was the first thing that was really bad. And then we didn't follow the format as it was. So it was very cheap, was sad, it was terrible. It was like, I'm going to suicide. It was very, very, very bad. Since the first episode, you could tell that was a failure, because we didn't follow the format. We didn't follow the format.
More questions? Okay, Mr. Azzad here is coming with a case study of a format to share. It's called Keep Your Light Shining. That's
yes,
true?
It's Keep Your Light Shining. One day, it was Sunday, I was watching a TV. It was a music channel. And I was influenced by a music video. And then I came up with an idea. From the existing stock footages, we made a teaser and then take it to the market. But I believed in so much that before MIP, I sent all my clients one email with a picture of this, saying that you will want to bribe our sales team to get this format. So people were curious to know, like, what is this? So I'm going to show you this one. I hope you like it. But Kiara loved it, and she wanted the Italian rights, but she couldn't get it. So I hope you like it. And we sold this one to 12 countries.
Eliminates 3 contestants, and the audience eliminates 1.
So this one is
excellent.
Thank
Bravo.
You. Thank you. So this one is starting live on ProZ1 in May and on TF1 in September. And former American Idol producer Nigel Lijo is shooting the pilot tomorrow in Las Vegas. Also, we have a great producer in Middle East, Reem, producing it. We sold it to 12 countries, and I think like this can be maybe one of the next big things. I hope so.
Thank you. To continue about the scripted and the non-scripted, we also need to talk about the Middle East as well. The Middle East as a special territory, the MENA region. And for all of you who work with people from the MENA region and you have experienced the difference with the censorship and with different elements, I would like first Mr. Frederick to tell me quickly what he thinks about the Middle East and if it's affecting a format that they really like, or there's a no-go for a format because of the censorship.
No, I think there is, for non-scripted format, it's a bit of a golden year, the last year, because both Abu Dhabi and Dubai are at the moment somehow boycotting Turkish drama. So they need to buy lots of entertainment shows. So we are in production of 3 different game shows in the Middle East region at the moment. So it's a bit like, you know, when Hollywood had the writer's strike, it was the birth of reality shows because they had to put something on air when they didn't have scripted, and then they had to commission lots of non-scripted series. So I think the censorship it's not censorship, it's more whatever, politics at the moment opens up a lot. Which makes them risk, because I think what we've been lacking a lot in the non-entertainment field the last years is broadcasters who are ready to take risks, because they rather safe of trying to take, you know, a safe thing. But at the moment they are taking quite a lot of risks. So in that sense, the censorship is positive at the moment. But I think in general, if you because we are kind of a lot looking at things from drama series from the Middle East to distribute, because we believe in the global idea of taking things from new territories. But when looking at the Middle East things, I think they are quite, on the scripted side, they're quite polite, and it's not really, they don't really dare to challenge fully or dare to show whatever beautiful actors fully, and so, which is a great limit for them, because it's becoming too polite. They need to, and their Turkey is very, you know, dare to challenge things, that I think is very important.
Okay. Before I continue with you about your experience in selling the scripted formats, I would like to ask Mr. Avi as well the same question, working around the Middle East area, being in your territory. What is your experience? We know the format is an international thing. It doesn't follow in general politics, or it doesn't follow anything around. So have you had experiences with the Middle East, working in the Middle East with formats, and what's your experience with this issue? Or
I think, you know, business sometimes is stronger than any politics, and the only thing is that you need to find the way to generate this business. And when we need to work in the Middle East, we usually work with third parties. So, for example, our very successful game show, Still Standing, we gave it to NBC, and NBC is acting as distributors on our behalf, you know, to do it in the Middle East. So, when there is a need, there is a way.
Excellent. Yeah, of course. All right. Any questions so far? All right. Is there any specific topic that any of you would like to discuss that we haven't touched so far? Maybe Mr. Frederick also would tell us about the sales of the scripted format.
Yeah, I think I think I told that maybe this, or Iset told that scripted formats are not so valuable. What we've experienced the last 2 years is an incredible demand of scripted formats. I think we've sold scripted rights for, you know, $3.5 million for the last 9 months. Because after all, if you take a look at the schedules of all countries in the world, I would say it's 80% drama. And the rest is, as they in America name entertainment, alternative programming. So I think, and I think there is an increasing understanding of the value of a good script to make a scripted, because if you don't have a good script, you don't have anything in drama. And we have quite amazing experience, anything from, I think the most interesting one is when a small broadcaster in Armenia adapted a Cell, which is a big drama hit that we've sold to 75 countries. And they were very nervous because they didn't dare to tell their audience that it was a Turkish script. And they were even denying it on live television in a talk show, that it's our own script. But then they made a local version of a Cell at no budget. It cost, their budget is very, very incredibly small. But it works fantastically. With a good script, they scored 80% share in Armenia. Of a local version of SL. That actually looked pretty good. So I think if we really take a look at the whole value of our business, I think the scripted formats have a great future because, nothing beats a good story.
Thank you. Carlotta, Mrs. Carlotta, I need to ask you about globalization. I know you mentioned this before we got to the conference. And I'm quite interested to know what you think about it, especially with the big formats around the region.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's basically what we were discussing earlier. So there is a whole trend of what works in one country. What we try to do, I think, all of us, is try to produce something in your own territory that can be exported at the maximum level. So in some countries, it is happening. Actually, it's at a very recent history that some countries have, rightly so, developed some formats that have actually been created thinking about already other rules in other countries. So when you start creating, if you start thinking about different cultures, it helps a lot in this whole thing about globalization. A lot of things that we create in our territory, but also in other territories. I mean, we see it in the northern countries, we see it in smaller countries, they tend to be very local. This is because you have maybe, the personality, as Frederick was saying, that is local, so the format follows the personality. At that point, you can't really sell a format that is based on a local personality. You have to find another local personality and probably adapt it. So the deal with globalization is that you always have to think, okay, so I'm building this structure, and will this structure be clear in a lot of different territories? Can this be adaptable? So that is what you have to think when you start building your format from scratch. It doesn't mean it's going to be successful. That's not, that's the best case scenario. But you have to start thinking a little bit beyond your borders. Israel has done this, Turkey has done this. We are a little lagging behind, but we need to start, all of us, start doing this if you want to get into the whole globalization idea.
Okay. Well, I want to ask each one of you the same question, and I want, in a few seconds, to summarize for me the ingredients of an epic format. Think about it and give me 3 elements or 4 elements of an epic format. And Frederick is laughing already. So let's start with Mrs. Chiara.
Do we want to tell
What's
him?
An epic format? Give us an example of an epic format.
A format that would go everywhere, that would not be limited by territories, that would do best anywhere.
It depends. If you ask this question to Mark Burnett, he will say storytelling, 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 because this is what he always say, no?
Okay.
In terms of scripted and unscripted formats. If you talk to Mr. Ballandi, who is one of the biggest producers in Italy, will say, first you have to entertain people, get emotions, and a good show, so a rich show, not a cheap show, good. So you have to give the impression that you have spent money, professionality, good show. So it also depends on the person who is going to answer the
exactly.
The
this is why we're asking everybody.
You have to entertain the public, of
Yes.
course, and you have to tell a good story. This is something that is true for scripted and unscripted, I think.
Okay, Mr. Avi?
Chiara said it all.
Okay. Frederick, Carlotta, is that just feel
I
free
think
to-
Carlotta summarized it well in the beginning with strong emotions, a strong story that touches people. Told in one way or another, whatever it's a script or if it's an entertainment show, it has to be that human, life-changing story somewhere.
So people need to identify themselves in whatever they're watching. Is this what you want to say, or is it different?
There is a very funny story. I met two Norwegian guys who were comedy script writers for TV2, and they had been American guys falling in love with Norwegian women and moving to Oslo, and they wrote a sitcom for many years. And then they had a pitch for the SBS group, ProSieben, and they thought that they were going to pitch a sitcom. And 40 minutes before the pitch, they were told, no, this is a reality pitch. It's not a scripted pitch at all. Go home. And they said, yeah, that's so sad. And then we said, let's go and pitch it anyway as a reality show. They know nothing about reality shows. And then they went in pitching exactly the same story. And then they used the character description of the sitcom as the casting brief for the reality show. Those are the person we're looking for. And then we have the episode story, what was going to happen. And that became the very successful format called Alt for Norge. I think ProSieben calls it something else. That is now running in 5-6 countries, where they basically gave the casting, the character description of a sitcom to the casting agency, and they came back with exactly those people. And then when they had the characters, they were just playing together according to their episode story. So I think it's the same thing, basically. You have to find the good characters and the good story, either if it's supposed to be reality or if it's scripted. Yeah. It's the same thing.
Good.
I think the key element is about taking risk. And in a way, this is contradicting to the old idea of the format business, because the whole idea of the format business that you sell something with a track record, with something which is proven. And you can find territories around the world, like let's say Australia, that the commissioner said, we will not take anything that was not tested before or has no track record elsewhere in the world. So in a way, if nobody will take the risk and try to bring new things into the screen, then our industry will not develop and will not advance. Everybody will try to copy what the other will do. So in general, it's the obligation of all of us that are in this business is to encourage the people that are willing to move forward and take risk and lead the industry.
Thank you. Tuba, what do you think from your point of view as somebody who executes the formats? What do you think from your side of production would be best to help out a format to be well executed?
Well, we usually just do as we're told, so I can't really say much about that. But the thing that is really nice for us is that, for example, I'm going to give The Amazing Race again, is that the fact that they incorporate the cultures of the cities that they go to or the countries. We did this Australian cooking show recently last year, and someone from the crew was like, "Oh, I watched. You know how you guys put the little Turkish bagels on the head? They had watched the Australian Amazing Race that was shot here. So it's almost like it gives the audience a know-how of different cities and different cultures. And even though it's kind of minuscule, it's nice to see that. And I feel like this is something that's really nice, and I would like to see more of it. Sort of like a globalization of everything, where we see different aspects of different cultures and cities, and if there was a format like this that could incorporate it, it would be great.
Thank you. Mr. Azza, what do you think about the risks that need to be taken that Mr. Avi was talking about, and who is taking more risks? Is it the creator, the producer, the network?
Well, based on the demand and competition, actually, people want to take risk. For example, in my format, it wasn't produced, so it was a risk for the people. But on the other hand, if one is not taking, the other one will take it. So at the end, in order not to let others to take it, they jump on it and they take it. And what they do is, usually, let's say, as I said, 12 people took the format, and 8 of them are waiting. They just want to see the others doing first.
Yes.
So, and luckily, like one is taking more risk and doing it earlier, and then the others will follow. So yes, someone needs to take the risk, but since you are in production business, when you watch the trailer and you look at the format, it's easy to know if it will work or not. If you are a good producer, you can understand. And I completely agree with Chiara. A good format will never fail with a good producer. So that's really true.
Well, that's fair enough. The last thing I want to talk about very briefly, because there's another conference about it, is the branded entertainment. And however, I need to ask one question is, how much does it affect the format? Does it help it much? Does it have disadvantages? What do you think, each one of you, about the branded entertainment, the branding and the format? Just Chiara, probably?
Start.
Carlotta.
It depends. It depends on how you build the branded content. I mean, if you are building from the product or the brand, it's of course the driver of the format that you create is the brand. It becomes a sort of advertising that is, it's the new generation of advertising. Classical advertising is on a downhill, whereas, branded content is, of course, growing. This means you have to be very careful, though, on weighing how much entertainment and how much the brand is actually integrated into the entertainment part. So it is very hard to make brands understand that they're not doing traditional advertising when they start doing branded content, because in their traditional advertising, it's like, I'm doing the 30 seconds, this is my brand, boom, out there. Whereas they're getting into something that is totally new to them, and you have to be, on the other hand, as a producer or a writer, you have to explain to the brand that the entertainment part has to be preserved. Okay, so it's very delicate in the building of this. On the other hand, if you have a format that is already there and you have to integrate some brands, this makes it a little bit easier on our side, because, that's the format. You brand have just decided to, cling on to the format, and in that case, it makes it simpler. Yet again, putting together two worlds that have been all their lives, so far away, it's still very delicate in both cases. But the second one is, of course, simpler. So.
Thank you.
I think many formats has from the very start like a commercial model involved. There are reasons why they're attractive for advertisers. I don't see a dramatic change, because you still need to make something, that attracts the audience, and a brand has to be integrated in one way or another. I think really it's very important to understand the financial model online or YouTube or whatever it is, and that's a part of the branded part. But to treat it totally separated or integrated in a clumsy way, that will of course destroy it.
Good to know. Well, one last thing, because we have a couple of minutes left. Let's talk about a buyer who goes into a market and he wants a format, and the format is not available for his region. So he goes to another company who has a similar format.
You just copy the form.
Sorry?
You copy the form.
Yes, of course. Actually, they don't need to do this. The question is, if, for example, I'm going to buy one and it's taken from my market, I always get to find, in the big markets, I always get to find a very similar format that works the same way. Okay? So for the people who do not know, I'm like, for example, let's assume I'm someone who doesn't know. If I buy this format, what happens between the two creators, the two IP holders? Is there a problem happening about IP? Is there, like, when two companies find out that they have the same format, who came out with the format first, if it's a new format, of course?
Normally, it's a big problem. When, for example, in Italy, when we had Strictly Come Dancing, Ballando con le Stelle, the dancing talent show.
Can you please be closer to the mic?
And Canale 5 tried to produce another show that actually was another format bought by Televisa, and was called Baila. The host of Strictly Come Dancing in Rai Uno start to push and start to a campaign against Canale 5, that at the end Canale 5 was forced not to broadcast the show. So it was a big issue, because the host in Italy, in that case, was so strong and she had the possibility to stop actually Canale 5 from
She had the power of doing it. Yeah.
broadcasting the show, for example. That was a
Yeah, but what I
case.
mean is there is no solution for that so far. It's just like
You
But
go
I
to
think we've
court.
seen-
In Italy, you go to court easily. For game show, quiz show, we normally go to court.
But we have many examples of
Yeah, there are many examples in
rip-offs that
Italy.
are like not working, and
Yeah,
it's
this is
a
a big,
failure.
big problem, and we can
Yes.
talk 2 hours for this. It's a
I
big
understand.
problem, I think, in our industry. It's a serious one.
Does it create a problem? Well, we heard from Mrs. Chiara that the channel can be in a problem, like they be stuck in a problem and they had to stop the show. So it's basically a problem for the network as well. Like the network was commissioning the show and they don't know, they bought a format, they paid for it, they're very happy, they come to production, they air the first episode, and then boom, there's a problem. Okay, so the IP holder or the licensor cannot do anything at that point, right?
No, it's a legal issue, and the legal issue is pending on the law in each, copyright laws are different in each territory.
Yes.
In some territories you can fight it and win, and in some territories you can
never
fail.
win.
So there is no, but the strongest element is, in the format is not only the legal copyright. Our business is to create a strong content brand. And when the brand is strong and successful, then the incentive to copy it or to compete with it is reduced.
Well, thank you very much. That was our conference for today about formats dominating the world. Thank you for the panel. Thank you for everybody who joined us. And have a good market.